She wasn't loud, she wasn't rude, she was simply black. And that alone was enough for an entitled mother to try and strip her of her dignity, right in front of a crowded plane. What happened next shocked every passenger and left the entire airport in silence. If stories like this matter to you, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell, because these are the stories too many people try to ignore. The boarding gate opened and passengers shuffled forward, scanning their tickets one by one. A black woman in her 30s stepped ahead, calm and focused, her boarding pass already in hand. The agent scanned it and gave a polite smile. "Welcome aboard." She moved down the jet bridge without hesitation. Behind her, a sharp voice cut through the line. "Wait, stop, she's in the wrong line." Heads turned. A woman in designer clothes stood with her teenage daughter at her side, glaring toward the black woman. The gate agent frowned. "Ma'am, her ticket is valid." The woman scoffed loudly. "No, people like her don't fly priority. She must have snuck in." The daughter tugged her sleeve, whispering nervously, "Mom, please stop." But the mother only snapped, "Check again. This is ridiculous." Passengers exchanged uneasy looks. A man tilted his phone slightly, pretending to scroll but clearly recording. The agent's tone hardened. "Her ticket is valid. If you continue, I'll have to call security." With an angry huff, the woman yanked her daughter forward. "Unbelievable," she muttered. Inside the cabin, the black woman found her seat in first class. She placed her bag overhead and sat down quietly. Moments later, the same mother froze in the aisle. Her seat was directly beside the woman. "You've got to be kidding me," she said, glaring. She waved down a passing flight attendant. "There's been a mistake. She's in my row. Move her." The attendant checked both tickets and gave a practiced smile. "No mistake. These are your assigned seats." The mother leaned closer to the black woman, lowering her voice but not her venom. "You think you belong here? Let me tell you something. You don't." The woman said nothing. Her silence carried more strength than words. Her daughter slid into the window seat, her face red with embarrassment. "Please, Mom," she whispered, "just stop." But the mother muttered under her breath, seething. Around them, passengers shifted uncomfortably. Phones angled. Whispers spread down the aisle. "Did you hear what she said?" The tension was thick, and the plane hadn't even left the ground. The hum of boarding continued as more passengers filed in, dragging carry-ons and settling into their seats. The flight attendants moved briskly through the aisles, checking overhead bins, offering polite smiles, repeating the same instructions they had given 1,000 times before. But in the front cabin, all eyes were on row 3. The tension that had started at the gate hadn't cooled. It had followed them into the plane, settling heavy in the air. Danielle sat straight, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Her expression was unreadable, but her posture carried quiet strength. She had learned long ago that sometimes silence was the sharpest weapon, sharper than anger, sharper than shouting. The mother, however, was anything but silent. "I don't know what's going on here," she said loudly, making sure the nearby passengers could hear. "But I am not paying this kind of money to sit next to—" She stopped just short of finishing the sentence, though everyone could fill in the blank. The teenage daughter shifted uncomfortably in her seat by the window, her face pale. "Mom, please, people are staring." "Good," the woman snapped, her lips curling into a tight smile. "They should stare. They should see the kind of nonsense we're expected to put up with these days." Her voice carried, cutting through the cabin like a blade. A man across the aisle looked up from his newspaper. A young woman further back pulled her earbuds out, her curiosity piqued. A businessman angled his phone in their direction, the camera open. The flight attendant who had spoken earlier returned, his expression still patient, but strained at the edges. "Ma'am, I've already explained. There's no mistake with the seating. Everyone is in their correct place." The mother leaned closer to him. "Do you even understand who I am? Do you know how much I paid for these tickets? My daughter deserves to feel safe and comfortable. And sitting next to—" She glanced pointedly at Danielle. "This is not acceptable." The words hung heavy, sharper than if she had just said them outright. The attendant's jaw tightened. He had dealt with drunks, loud talkers, people who refused to put their seatbacks upright. But this was different. He straightened his posture. "Ma'am, your daughter is safe. There is no issue here." Danielle remained still. Not a word escaped her lips. Her calm presence only seemed to inflame the other woman further. "You're not going to do anything?" the mother said, her voice rising. "You're just going to let her sit here, next to my daughter? This is discrimination against me. That's what this is." Gasps rippled through the nearby passengers. One man let out a disbelieving laugh. A young woman muttered, "Unbelievable." The attendant lowered his voice. "Ma'am, I need you to sit down and remain calm. We cannot proceed with boarding until everyone is seated." The daughter's face burned red. She pressed her palms into her lap, whispering desperately, "Mom, stop it. Please, just stop." But her mother was unmoved. She raised her chin defiantly. "No, I will not be silenced. Someone needs to say it." She turned to Danielle. "You think just because you managed to buy a ticket, that makes you equal to us? Let me tell you something." Her words were cut short when a man 2 rows back spoke up. "Hey lady, enough. Sit down and shut up." The cabin went quiet for a moment. All eyes turned to him, middle-aged, wearing a gray polo shirt, his arms crossed. He looked tired of the entire scene. The woman's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me, who do you think you're talking to?" The man didn't flinch. "You, and everyone here agrees. You're embarrassing yourself." A murmur of agreement spread. Someone whispered, "Yeah, sit down." Another passenger clapped once, sharply as if punctuating the demand. The mother flushed, caught between fury and embarrassment, but instead of backing down, she turned her anger back on Danielle. "This is your fault. You're causing this. If you had any decency, you'd get up and move." Still, Danielle said nothing. She sat tall, her eyes forward, her silence deafening. The daughter's voice cracked as she whispered, "Mom, you're making me want to cry. Please stop. Everyone's watching." The mother ignored her. She reached for the attendant again. "I want to speak to the captain. Get him here now." The attendant's patience finally cracked. "Ma'am, the captain is preparing for departure. He cannot come here for something like this." "Like this?" she repeated incredulously. "This is serious. This is about the safety of my child." The attendant's eyes hardened. "Your child is safe. What you're doing right now is not." The daughter covered her face with her hands. A few rows back, someone muttered, "Poor kid." The mother straightened, her voice dripping with authority she didn't actually have. "Fine. Then I'll refuse to take this flight until the captain comes here personally. You can delay the plane if you want, but this isn't over." Passengers groaned. Someone said loudly, "Oh, come on," another sighed. "We're never going to leave at this rate." Phones were raised higher now. Screens glowed, cameras rolling. The entire scene was being documented from multiple angles. Danielle finally moved. She turned her head slowly, locking eyes with the woman beside her. Her voice was soft but clear, every word precise. "You are the only one making this flight unsafe." The cabin froze. The calmness of the statement cut sharper than any shout. The woman's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. She seemed rattled, unprepared for Danielle's composure. Finally, she spat. "How dare you!" But before she could finish, another passenger spoke up. "She's right. You're the problem, not her." Another voice followed. "Yeah, let her be." And another. "We all just want to leave. Sit down already." The woman whipped her head around, glaring at the strangers who had turned against her. For the first time, doubt flickered in her eyes. She glanced at her daughter, who was now openly crying into her hands. "Mom," the girl sobbed quietly, "please, please stop." The mother stiffened, her pride warring with the reality closing in around her. But instead of relenting, she doubled down. "If the captain doesn't come here, then we're not flying." The attendant exchanged a look with his colleague across the aisle. They had seen enough. One of them discreetly picked up the intercom phone. A murmur spread through the cabin. "They're calling the captain." The mother leaned back in her seat with a smug smile. convinced she had won. Good. Finally, someone in charge will handle this properly. Danielle remained perfectly still. Her silence, her composure, her refusal to be rattled, it was infuriating to the woman beside her, but it drew quiet admiration from those watching. The cabin had become a stage, and every passenger was part of the audience, waiting for the next act to begin. The plane was filling quickly, but the front rows had become an island, detached from the ordinary rhythm of boarding. Where most flights carried the hum of chatter, the rustle of bags, the shuffle of shoes on carpet, here there was only one sound that mattered, the cutting voice of the entitled mother in row 3. Her voice did not lower, did not soften. If anything, it had grown sharper since the confrontation at the gate. Every word was performed for an audience, and she was certain her performance was righteous. I will not sit here quietly while this airline pretends this is acceptable, she said, gesturing pointedly at the seat beside her. This is first class. My daughter deserves better than to be crammed next to someone who doesn't belong. Her daughter sat pressed against the window, shoulders hunched, her hands clenched in her lap. She did not look at her mother. She did not look at Danielle. She stared down at her own shoes, as though if she held still long enough, she might disappear. Danielle didn't move. Not even a flicker of annoyance crossed her face. She sat upright, dignified, as though carved in stone. The flight attendant at the aisle leaned in, his voice low, his patience thinning. Ma'am, I've told you already, there's no mistake. All passengers are in their correct seats. The woman let out a short laugh, dripping with condescension. Correct seats? Oh, sure, if that's what you're calling it now. This is a disgrace, her words carried. The man across the aisle lowered his newspaper, eyebrows rising. Two women a row back leaned closer to each other, whispering. A college-age passenger further behind angled her phone just slightly upward, her screen already glowing red recording. The daughter finally spoke, her voice a whisper, barely audible. Mom, please, you're making people stare. Let them stare, her mother snapped. They should see what's happening. They should see how we're treated after paying thousands of dollars. I will not let you suffer in silence. Not next to... She stopped herself again, but the pause said more than words ever could. The flight attendant's voice stiffened. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you again to calm down and lower your voice. The woman turned on him. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. I'm a paying customer. Do you even understand how much I paid for these seats? Do you know who my husband is? He's not going to like hearing about this. Her daughter winced. Mom. But the mother pressed forward, her voice rising. No, sweetheart. They need to hear it. They need to understand we're not just anyone. We are not going to be pushed around. Not by this airline. Not by anyone. The whispers began to ripple more loudly now. Two businessmen across the aisle exchanged a glance. One shook his head. Seen this before, he muttered. Always the same, the other whispered back. The louder they are, the more wrong they are. A young woman behind them typed furiously on her phone. The glow of the screen showed her message. Drama on my flight, woman losing it because of a black passenger in first class. Disgusting. She hit send. The ripple spread. People looked up from their seats, from their tablets, from their conversations. The story of row 3 had already begun to leak beyond the plane. And still, Danielle said nothing. She didn't flinch. She didn't defend herself. She sat, her silence louder than shouting. The mother sneered at her stillness. You think staying quiet makes you look dignified? She said, her lips curling. It doesn't. It just proves you don't have the right to be here. If you belonged, you'd say something. Her daughter's cheeks burned red. Please, just stop talking. Everyone can hear you. The mother ignored her. Ma'am, the attendant tried again. This behavior is unacceptable. If it continues, you may be removed from the flight. The mother laughed. A loud, harsh laugh that rang across the cabin. Removed? For what? For trying to protect my daughter? Go ahead. Try it. See what happens when the media hears that you threw a mother and child off a plane while that... She jabbed a finger toward Danielle. Gets to stay. A murmur of disapproval swept through the rows. Someone muttered, unbelievable. Another whispered, she's out of control. Danielle remained still. It was a man diagonally behind her who spoke next. His voice was calm, conversational, but it carried. You know, lady, I think your daughter would be a lot more comfortable if you stopped talking. Gasps and stifled laughs erupted. The mother's head whipped around. What did you just say to me? The man shrugged. You heard me. The only one making her uncomfortable is you. The daughter's shoulders shook. Tears pooled in her eyes, spilling over silently. She raised a sleeve to wipe her face, but before she could, Danielle reached into her bag. Slowly, deliberately, she withdrew a folded tissue. She placed it gently on the shared armrest. The daughter hesitated, then took it. For the first time, her eyes flicked toward Danielle. They were filled with shame, apology, and gratitude all at once. The mother saw it, her face twisted with rage. Don't take that. You don't need her pity. But the girl held the tissue anyway. The whispers grew louder. A woman behind leaned toward her husband. She's humiliating her own child, she whispered. Her husband nodded, and she doesn't even see it. The mother raised her chin again, speaking louder, determined to reclaim authority. All of you can whisper and snicker all you want. You don't understand. You don't know what it's like to be a mother. I won't apologize for protecting my child. That was when another voice cut through, firm and clear. It came from across the aisle, a woman in a sharp navy blazer. Her eyes were fierce. Her voice did not waver. Protecting your child, she said, doesn't mean teaching her hate. The words landed like a gavel. The cabin stilled, heads turned. The mother's mouth opened, but no rebuttal came fast enough. The daughter broke. Her face collapsed into her hands. Her sobs loud now, uncontrollable. Danielle's eyes softened. She shifted slightly closer, her body angled protectively toward the girl. She wasn't looking at the mother anymore. Her attention was on the child, the one caught in the middle, the one who had asked for none of this. The mother bristled, sensing her grip on the narrative slipping. She raised her voice, desperate now. Fine. You want to take her side? Go ahead. But I am not letting this plane take off until the captain comes out here. I want him here. Now. The attendant sighed. His patience was exhausted. Ma'am, if the captain comes out, it will be to deal with your behavior, not hers. The woman smirked, convinced she still held the upper hand. We'll see. You'll regret treating me like this. She leaned back in her seat, arms crossed, smiling smugly. But the smugness didn't reach her eyes. For the first time, there was a flicker of doubt, a crack in her performance. The daughter cried quietly into Danielle's tissue. Danielle sat with unshakable calm. And the cabin had chosen its side. The whispers slowed. The phones kept recording. The witnesses kept watching. And in the cockpit, the captain was being briefed. The next act was about to begin. The murmurs in the cabin had reached a rhythm of their own, like waves crashing gently against the shore. People leaned into one another, trading half-whispered comments, shaking their heads, rolling their eyes, glancing toward row 3 where the storm still swirled. Phones hovered like watchful eyes, recording every flicker of expression, every pause in conversation, every pointed gesture. The flight attendants, who usually wore neutral smiles like armor, no longer looked untouched by the chaos. Their patience was stretched thin. Their glances toward one another carried messages that didn't need to be spoken aloud. This isn't going away. We need backup. The lead attendant finally reached for the phone mounted discreetly near the galley wall. He turned his back slightly, shielding the motion, speaking quietly into the receiver. His voice was low, calm, professional. But everyone knew what it meant. The captain was being summoned. The mother saw it. She sat back with a triumphant grin spreading across her face. Her arms crossed tightly, her chin lifted. There we go, she said loudly, ensuring every passenger nearby could hear her. Finally, someone's taking this seriously. I knew once the captain heard, he'd understand. He won't let us be treated this way. He won't let her get away with this. Her daughter sat curled against the window, the tissue Danielle had given her pressed against swollen eyes. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. She didn't meet anyone's gaze, not her mother's, not Danielle's, not the passengers who stared. She wanted to vanish, to dissolve into air, to be anywhere but here. Danielle tilted her head slightly, watching her with steady calm. Her expression softened, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence was a language the girl understood perfectly. This isn't your fault. The mother's performance grew grander with every passing second. You all think you're so clever, she said, turning her voice outward toward the cabin. Whispering, laughing, mocking me like I'm the villain here. But you'll see. Wait until the captain comes. He'll put an end to this nonsense. He'll put her back where she belongs. Her daughter flinched at the word belongs. Danielle did not. Her spine remained straight, her face calm, her composure unshaken. A man across the aisle, mid-40s with salt and pepper hair, shook his head in disbelief. Lady, he said under his breath, though loud enough to be heard, you have no idea what you're doing. The woman whipped her head toward him. And you do? You think you know better than me what's right for my daughter? The man leaned back, folding his arms. I know when someone's about to regret every word that's leaving their mouth. A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the rows. Someone let out a short clap, a single sharp sound that made heads turn. The mother's cheeks flushed. Still, she refused to retreat. She jabbed her finger toward Danielle. Enjoy this little victory. Enjoy sitting there smug and silent. Once the captain arrives, it's over. You'll be moved, maybe even removed from the plane. Mark my words. At that, Danielle finally moved. Slowly, she turned her head, her eyes locking with the woman's. Her voice was quiet, but so sharp it cut through every murmur in the cabin. I'm not going anywhere. The cabin stilled. The sentence wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It carried the weight of unshakable truth. The daughter closed her eyes, tears spilling freely now, streaking down her cheeks. She gripped the tissue like it was the only thing tethering her to earth. Her mother let out a brittle laugh, far too sharp to sound genuine. We'll see about that, she said. We'll see what the captain thinks. The lead attendant returned from the phone. His face was composed, but his tone was firmer now, stripped of its earlier patience. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, the captain has been made aware of the situation. He'll be coming out shortly to address it. For now, I need everyone to remain seated and calm. A wave of groans swept through the rows. You've got to be kidding me. We're never leaving on time. Of course this flight is delayed. The woman leaned back smugly, adjusting her blouse as though preparing for a portrait. You hear that? She said, her voice dripping with triumph. The captain is coming, finally. Someone who understands authority, who knows what's right, who won't let us be treated like this. But around her, whispers grew sharper. They weren't whispers of support. She really thinks she's right. She's about to get embarrassed. Can't wait to see her face. She couldn't make out the words, but she could feel them, dozens of eyes on her, dozens of judgments slicing through the armor of her smugness. For the first time, a flicker of unease crossed her face before she masked it again. The minutes dragged. Each second stretched thin, longer than the last. The passengers shifted in their seats, restless and irritated. Overhead bins clicked open and shut as people searched for distractions. In the back, children grew restless, their parents shushing them half-heartedly. The entire plane's energy had shifted. This wasn't boarding anymore. This was a standoff, and everyone was trapped in the audience. Then the sound came. A sharp click, the cockpit door opening. Instantly, silence consumed the cabin. Phones rose higher. Conversations died mid-sentence. The air itself seemed to still. The captain stepped out. Tall, composed, uniform crisp. His cap tucked neatly under his arm. He walked with the confidence of someone who had spent his life commanding the skies. His presence alone commanded silence. He scanned the cabin quickly, taking in the raised phones, the tense expressions, the hunched figure of the daughter, the rigid calm of Danielle, and the defiant posture of the mother. The mother immediately straightened, adjusting her posture, smoothing her blouse, forcing her face into an expression of weary righteousness. She whispered to her daughter, "See, I told you. It's going to be fine now. Just watch." Her daughter didn't respond. She couldn't. She sat hunched, eyes down, body trembling, clutching the tissue Danielle had given her, like it was her only shield. The captain walked slowly down the aisle, each step deliberate, his gaze never faltering. The passengers followed his every move with their eyes, their breaths held, waiting for the verdict. He stopped at row 3. His eyes moved from the mother to Danielle and back again. His voice was calm, deep, resonant. "Ma'am," he said, "I've been informed there's a problem." The mother wasted no time. Words spilled from her mouth like bullets. "Yes, Captain, thank you for coming. Finally, someone who understands. I've been trying to explain to your staff, but they wouldn't listen. There's been a mistake. This woman," she gestured sharply at Danielle, "was seated next to my daughter, and it's unacceptable. My daughter doesn't feel safe. She shouldn't have to endure this for an entire flight." Gasps echoed through the cabin, a sharp intake of breath from one row, a whispered, "Wow," from another. The captain didn't move. His expression was unreadable, his silence deliberate. The mother, mistaking it for agreement, pressed on. "I've been telling them this is first class. We paid for comfort. We paid for safety. Surely you understand. Surely you see the problem here." The captain finally spoke, his tone steady. "I do see." Her face lit with satisfaction. "Exactly. Thank you. I knew you'd understand. I knew you'd see reason. So you'll arrange for her to be moved? Or better yet, put us on another flight with proper accommodations?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Phones tilted higher, eyes widened, mouths hung open, waiting. Danielle sat perfectly still, her hands folded, her face calm. The daughter sat trembling, clutching the tissue like it was a lifeline, wishing she could vanish into the seat. And the captain drew in a slow breath. His next words would shatter everything. The silence stretched across the cabin, taut as a wire ready to snap. Dozens of passengers leaned in, their phones raised, eyes fixed on the man in uniform standing squarely in the aisle. The captain's face gave nothing away. His jaw was set, his eyes steady, his bearing commanding, yet calm. He let the weight of the moment hang before speaking again. He turned slightly toward Danielle. She didn't flinch, didn't bow her head. She met his gaze with quiet certainty. Then he looked back at the mother. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "help me understand. What exactly is the problem?" The woman released a breath of triumph, mistaking the question for validation. She sat straighter, her voice sharper, louder, more self-assured. "The problem," she said, jabbing her finger toward Danielle, "is her, this woman. She shouldn't be here. She doesn't belong in this row, in this cabin. My daughter and I paid for first class. We expected a certain environment. Not this. Not her sitting beside my child." Her words landed like stones dropped in water. The ripples of disgust, disbelief, and quiet fury spread instantly. Someone let out a low hiss of unreal. Another whispered, "Did she really just say that?" The daughter's face crumpled. She buried it in her hands. The tissue Danielle had given her was damp and shredded at the edges. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. The captain's gaze flicked to the girl, then back to the mother. His voice dropped lower, colder. "So the problem," he repeated slowly, "is who this passenger is. Not her ticket, not her seat, just her." The mother hesitated, her lips parting, but pride wouldn't let her retreat. "Exactly, thank you. I knew you'd understand. She's not the kind of person who should be in first class." Every word she spoke was another nail in the coffin of her own dignity. Phones zoomed in. Heads shook. Someone muttered, "This is going to go viral in 5 minutes." Danielle still hadn't moved. Her composure was a shield. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to argue. Her silence made the woman's ranting look louder, uglier, more desperate. The captain stepped closer, lowering himself slightly so his eyes were level with the woman's. His tone carried the weight of command, but also something sharper. Disappointment. "Ma'am, let me make sure I understand. You're demanding that I remove a paying passenger from her rightful seat because of your personal feelings about her?" The mother gave a curt nod. "Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's inappropriate. It's uncomfortable. He cut her off, voice firm. "Unacceptable is the word I'd use, but not for her." The cabin broke into a low hum. A few claps scattered, silenced quickly by the tension still hanging in the air. The woman blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me?" The captain straightened again, towering over her, his uniform immaculate, his authority unquestionable. His words rang clear, carrying through the cabin. "This passenger," he said, gesturing toward Danielle, "has the same rights as anyone else on this plane. She bought her ticket. She boarded properly. She's seated in the correct row. She's broken no rules. She has shown nothing but respect and composure." He paused. "The same cannot be said of you." The mother's jaw dropped. "What? What are you talking about? I'm the victim here. I've been mistreated since the gate." The captain didn't raise his voice, but his tone hardened. "You've disrupted boarding. You've insulted a fellow passenger. You've made baseless demands of my crew. And now you're teaching your daughter." His eyes flicked to the girl, trembling in her seat. "That prejudice is acceptable behavior." A hush fell. The daughter's shoulders shook harder, but now her sobs were mingled with something else, relief, as though someone had finally said the words she wished she could. The mother stammered, I just wanted my daughter to be comfortable." The captain leaned in slightly. His voice softened, but the steel beneath it remained. "Comfort doesn't come from tearing others down. Safety doesn't come from exclusion. And dignity doesn't come from belittling a stranger who's done nothing but sit in her seat." The woman's face burned red. She looked around, desperate for support, but found none. Every eye that met hers was filled with condemnation or pity. Every phone recording captured her unraveling pride. Still, she clung to the last scrap of defiance. "You don't understand. People like her?" The captain's voice cut through her words like a blade. "Stop. Right there." The silence that followed was deafening. "On this plane," he said slowly, each word deliberate, "there are no people like her. There are only passengers, and every passenger, regardless of race, gender, background, or wealth, deserves respect." Applause erupted from the back rows, hesitant at first, then louder, growing, spreading until the cabin vibrated with it. Even those who hadn't clapped looked on with fierce approval. The mother's face twisted. "This is ridiculous," she spat. "You're all against me. This is some kind of setup." The captain didn't flinch. His eyes narrowed and his words landed with finality. "Ma'am, I will only say this once. You have two choices. You may sit down, remain quiet, and complete this flight without further incident, or you may deboard this aircraft immediately. But you will not harass another passenger. Not on my plane." The words "my plane" echoed like a gavel striking. Gasps rippled. Murmurs flared. The weight of authority was undeniable. The woman faltered, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Her daughter reached out, a trembling hand tugging at her sleeve. For the first time since the ordeal began, the girl found her voice. "Mom," she whispered hoarsely, "please, just stop. Please." The tissue fell from her hand to the floor, damp and crumpled. She wiped her face with her sleeve, looking not at her mother, but at Danielle, her eyes wide, desperate, silently apologizing for everything. Danielle met her gaze and gave the smallest nod, a quiet gesture of grace. The mother, cornered by truth, by authority, by the silent judgment of dozens of witnesses, sagged slightly in her seat. Her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line. She muttered something under her breath, too faint to be heard, but no apology came. The captain studied her for a long moment. Then he straightened, his voice rising so the entire cabin could hear. This flight will continue as scheduled. Every passenger here will be treated with respect. If anyone cannot manage that, they are free to leave now. The choice is theirs. Not a single person moved. The captain nodded once, satisfied, then turned to Danielle. His tone softened. Ma'am, if you need anything during this flight, you let me or my crew know. You have my word. You'll be treated with the dignity you deserve. Danielle inclined her head, her voice calm, strong, unshaken. Thank you, Captain. The applause returned, louder now, spreading across the cabin like a wave. Some passengers cheered. Others shouted, That's right, and well said. The mother shrank further into her seat, staring out the window, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Her daughter, however, looked at Danielle with something new in her gaze. Not just apology, but admiration, even gratitude. The captain gave a final nod to the attendants, then walked back toward the cockpit, his presence still lingering in the air long after he disappeared behind the door. The cabin was different now. The tension had broken, replaced by something else. Solidarity, respect, a shared understanding that they had witnessed a line drawn clearly in the sand. And at the center of it all, Danielle sat quietly, her dignity intact, her silence more powerful than all the shouting in the world. The hum of conversation rose again after the captain's words, but it wasn't the same hum as before. No longer sharp whispers or muttered disbelief. It was the low, rolling thunder of unity. Passengers leaned across aisles, shaking their heads in agreement, exchanging words like, unbelievable, and she handled that like a queen. Others replayed clips they'd recorded, already imagining how far the video would spread once uploaded. The mother sat rigidly, staring out the window as though the clouds might offer her escape. Her cheeks flushed hot, her pride burning under the weight of every phone still angled discreetly toward her. Beside her, her daughter sat with red eyes, her body trembling less now. She kept sneaking glances at Danielle, silent gratitude spilling from every glance. She wanted to say something, but her voice felt locked behind walls of fear and shame. Danielle didn't push. She sat in dignified stillness, her chin lifted, her eyes calm, her silence stronger than any lecture could have been. The cabin slowly began to settle, attendants resuming checks, passengers buckling in. The plane vibrated faintly as the engines roared to life. Yet the tension hadn't truly dissipated. It hovered, waiting for the next spark. The lead attendant returned, bending slightly toward Danielle. His tone was quieter now, deferential. Ma'am, the captain asked me to check if there's anything you need before we prepare for takeoff. A drink perhaps? A blanket? Anything at all. Danielle gave a small shake of her head. I'm fine, thank you. The attendant nodded respectfully, then straightened and addressed the row in general. We'll be departing shortly. Please remain seated until we're airborne. The mother scoffed under her breath. Oh, so now she's special treatment. Figures. A few nearby passengers shot her sharp looks, but Danielle didn't react. The engines roared louder, and the plane began to taxi. The lights dimmed slightly, the cabin shuddering with each turn of the massive machine. For a moment, it seemed as though the ordeal was finally, mercifully over. Then the captain's voice returned, this time over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Before we take off, I'd like to make a brief announcement. Every head lifted, every phone angled upward again. The mother smirked faintly. Here it comes, she muttered, straightening in her seat. He's going to apologize for the mix-up. But Danielle knew better. She folded her hands in her lap, her face serene. The captain's voice carried through the cabin, rich, steady, commanding. As many of you witnessed, there was some confusion during boarding. I'd like to set the record straight. The passenger seated in row 3 Seat A is exactly where she belongs. There was no mistake, no error. She is not only a valued passenger, she is an honored guest on this flight. Gas swept through the cabin like wind. Heads turned, murmurs flared. The mother's smirk faltered. Honored guest, she whispered, frowning. The captain continued. Some of you may not be aware, but this passenger has been invited overseas to deliver the keynote address at the International Forum on Human Rights, a gathering of leaders, activists, and scholars from around the world. Her work has changed lives, shaped policy, and inspired countless people to stand against injustice. It is my privilege and this crew's privilege to ensure her safe passage. The cabin erupted. Applause thundered, louder than before, fierce and uncontainable. Cheers rang out, some passengers shouting, "Yes," and "Tell it." Others stood halfway from their seats, clapping above their heads. The mother's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked from Danielle to the captain's voice overhead, her entire body trembling with shock. Her daughter's eyes widened, awe spilling across her features. She turned fully to face Danielle now, her voice trembling. "That's you. You're the speaker, the activist." Danielle finally spoke, her tone gentle but unshakably firm. "Yes, that's me." The girl's jaw quivered. She looked down at her lap, ashamed. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry for everything." Danielle reached out, resting a steady hand over the girl's trembling fingers. Her touch was warm, grounding. "It's not your apology I need," Danielle said softly, "but I hear you." Tears welled in the girl's eyes again. Not of shame this time, but of release. She nodded, gripping Danielle's hand tightly. The mother's head snapped around, her voice sharp, desperate. You think this changes anything? Just because she's some activist?" The man across the aisle leaned forward, his voice cutting. "Lady, it changes everything. You spent 20 minutes trying to tear down someone who spent her life building others up." Others chimed in, voices overlapping. "She deserves better than this. You embarrassed yourself, not her." "Unbelievable." The applause swelled again. The mother shrank further into her seat, sweat shining on her forehead, her breath shallow and uneven. She tried to hold her composure, but her daughter's hand was still clasped with Danielle's, and the sight shattered her last defense. The captain's voice returned one final time. "To our honored guest, I'd like to say this. Thank you. Thank you for your work, your dignity, and for reminding us all today what true strength looks like. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be taking off shortly. Let's treat one another with the respect every passenger deserves. Thank you." The intercom clicked off. The cabin erupted again. Applause, whistles, cheers, louder, longer, fierce with solidarity. Danielle inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the waves of support without rising, without boasting. She didn't need to. Her dignity spoke louder than any victory pose. The daughter leaned closer, whispering urgently, "You're amazing. You didn't yell. You didn't fight. You just..." She trailed off, shaking her head in awe. "I wish I could be like that." Danielle smiled faintly, her voice calm. "You already are. You just haven't realized it yet." The girl blinked, her throat tightening. She squeezed Danielle's hand again, then pulled her knees up slightly, curling into her seat. Not out of shame, but safety. Finally feeling it for the first time all flight. The mother turned sharply. "Don't listen to her," she hissed, her voice low and frantic. "You're my daughter, not hers." But the girl didn't answer. For once, she didn't flinch at her mother's sharpness. She kept her gaze on Danielle, on the calm strength radiating from her presence. The engines roared louder. The plane jolted slightly as it turned into the runway. The overhead lights dimmed further, casting the cabin into a soft glow. Attendants moved briskly, checking seatbelts, securing trays. As the plane accelerated, the pressure pressed everyone back into their seats. The momentary silence of takeoff filled the cabin, broken only by the roar of engines and the pounding of hearts. When the nose lifted and the cabin tilted upward, the applause still echoed in the air, lingering like an anthem. Danielle looked out the window, watching the ground fall away, the city shrinking below, the sky opening vast and endless. Her reflection in the glass was steady, unbroken. She had faced down prejudice, endured insult, and emerged without losing her composure. The cabin knew it. The daughter beside her knew it. The entire world, once this footage spread, would know it. The mother sat in rigid silence, staring at the seat back in front of her, her earlier arrogance shattered. The daughter leaned slightly against Danielle's armrest, not touching, but close enough to show where her trust now lay. And as the plane pierced through clouds, Danielle's silence said everything. The plane leveled off, engine steady now, clouds streaming past the windows in endless white currents. The seatbelt sign chimed softly overhead, but no one moved to unbuckle. The cabin was still thick with the aftershocks of what had just unfolded. Phones lowered slowly, like flags after a battle. Passengers looked at one another with wide eyes, as though silently acknowledging, "We just witnessed something bigger than a flight delay. We witnessed a reckoning." Danielle sat quietly, her gaze turned toward the horizon beyond the glass. Her hands rested loosely in her lap, every line of her posture composed. She hadn't raised her voice once, yet the entire cabin had been moved by her presence. The mother shifted uncomfortably, tugging at her seatbelt as though it were suddenly too tight. Her pride, once inflated like a balloon, now sagged, torn open by her own words. She refused to look at anyone, especially Danielle, her jaw clenched, her fingers twisting in her lap. Beside her, her daughter sat straighter than she had the entire flight. Her hands still trembled faintly, but her eyes were steady now, fixed on Danielle with something close to reverence. The lead attendant appeared again, this time carrying a small tray. He leaned gently toward Danielle. "Compliments of the captain," he said softly, setting down a crystal glass filled with sparkling water, garnished with a slice of lemon. "And from all of us, thank you." A smattering of applause began again, quieter this time, respectful. Danielle inclined her head in acknowledgement, but said nothing. The mother muttered under her breath, "This is absurd. They're treating her like royalty." Her daughter turned, her voice low but clear enough to be heard. "Maybe because she deserves it." The mother's head snapped toward her, eyes wide. "Excuse me?" The girl's throat bobbed, but she didn't look away. "You embarrassed me. You embarrassed yourself, and you tried to humiliate someone who did nothing to you. She stayed calm while you shouted. She was strong while you fell apart. She's everything I wish you were." The words landed like a slap. Gasps flickered through nearby rows. Passengers leaned forward, listening, recording, bearing witness to a confrontation more intimate than the captain's speech. The mother's face twisted, caught between anger and hurt. "How dare you?" But the girl cut her off, voice trembling but steady. "No, Mom, how dare you? How dare you make me sit here while you attack someone for nothing? I was ashamed of you. Do you understand that? Ashamed." The mother recoiled, her hand frozen in midair as though she'd meant to gesture but lost the will. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Danielle finally turned from the window, her calm gaze sweeping between them. Her voice, low and clear, broke the silence. "Don't turn this into a wound you can't heal. What matters now isn't what's been said, it's what you choose to do next." The daughter looked at her, desperate. "But she won't." Danielle raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "Change is slow, sometimes painful. But it starts with truth, and you've spoken yours." The girl's chin trembled, her eyes welling again, but this time not from shame. She nodded, clutching Danielle's words like a rope thrown across deep water. The mother stared at Danielle, something breaking in her hardened expression. For a fleeting second, guilt flashed across her face, raw and unguarded, but pride quickly slammed shut over it, locking it away. She turned back toward the window, her voice barely audible. I don't owe anyone an apology. The cabin stirred. Passengers exchanged glances. Some shook their heads, disgusted. Others muttered, unbelievable, under their breath. Danielle, however, didn't react. Her silence remained steady, unshaken. She looked again toward the sky beyond the glass, her reflection calm, composed. Minutes passed in quiet hum. The attendants rolled carts down the aisles, offering drinks and meals. Conversations rose and fell in pockets, some still buzzing about what had happened, others retreating into small talk, trying to find normalcy again. Yet row 3 remained its own universe. A daughter who had found her voice, a mother stewing in pride, a woman who had weathered the storm without ever raising hers. When the attendants reached them, the mother waved off the tray with a sharp flick of her hand. Nothing. The daughter, though, accepted a small bottle of water. She turned to Danielle shyly, holding it out. Do you want this? You gave me your tissue. I just want to give something back. Danielle's lips curved in the faintest smile. Keep it. You'll need it more than me. The girl swallowed hard, then twisted the cap, sipping quietly. But the gesture, small as it was, anchored her. A chance to offer instead of take, to restore a balance her mother had shattered. Hours passed. Clouds stretched like oceans beneath them. The hum of engines filled the cabin, steady and ceaseless. Some passengers slept, others watched movies, but the memory of what had unfolded lingered like a watermark. Then as the descent began, the captain's voice returned one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our approach. I'd like to thank you all for your patience during boarding. Today reminded us that flying isn't just about traveling from one place to another. It's about how we treat each other in the spaces between. Let's remember that. The words drew another round of applause, not loud, not raucous, but steady, heartfelt. The mother's hands clenched in her lap. She didn't clap. She didn't look up. But her daughter joined the others, her small hands striking together. Her gaze fixed forward, not caring whether her mother approved. The wheels touched down with a shudder, the plane rumbling along the runway until it slowed, steady and controlled. The cabin lights brightened, seatbelt signs chimed, and the usual rush of unbuckling began. But row 3 didn't move. Danielle sat still, waiting. The mother fumbled with her bag, shoving items back into her purse with clipped, frantic motions. The daughter lingered, hesitant to stand, torn between following her mother and staying close to Danielle. Finally, Danielle rose. She pulled her bag down with ease, slinging it over her shoulder. She turned to the girl, her voice soft but resolute. Remember, your voice matters. Don't let anyone silence it, not even the people you love. The girl's throat tightened. She nodded, her eyes shimmering. Thank you, she whispered. Danielle gave her a final nod, then stepped into the aisle. Passengers parted to let her pass, some offering nods of respect, others murmuring quiet thanks as though she had done something for them too. The mother avoided her gaze entirely, staring rigidly at the seatback in front of her. Pride still chained her, even as her daughter watched Danielle walk away with an expression she'd never forget. As Danielle moved toward the exit, the captain reappeared, waiting near the door. He extended his hand. She shook it firmly, her calm composure unbroken. It was an honor to have you aboard, he said. She inclined her head, and an honor to be carried safely. Passengers behind her clapped softly, their respect following her down the jet bridge, their eyes lingering on the figure who had turned an ordinary flight into a lesson in dignity. He sulked. Back in row 3, the mother finally exhaled, shoulders slumping. Her daughter turned to her, voice quiet but firm. You can ignore it all you want, but I won't forget what she said, or what you did. The mother's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't answer. For the first time, silence was her only shield. And the girl knew. Some lessons don't fade when the wheels touch the ground. Some lessons follow you long after the flight ends. As Danielle stepped off the jet bridge, The crowd inside the terminal went on with its usual blur of motion. Families reuniting, travelers rushing to connections, announcements echoing overhead. Yet for those who had been on that flight, nothing felt quite the same. Because dignity had spoken louder than arrogance. Because silence had proven stronger than hate. Because one woman reminded them all, true strength never needs to shout. And maybe, just maybe, every single person who witnessed it would carry that lesson into the world beyond the airport. If this story moved you, don't just let it end here. Share it so more people see the power of dignity over discrimination. Leave your thoughts below. Would you have stood up in that moment? And subscribe for more stories that remind us, respect is not a privilege, it's a right.